Good evening. Welcome to Scotland at 7. I'm Nena Bardwaj. The first ever national action plan to encourage and support all parents to be actively involved in their child's education has been launched by Deputy First Minister John Swinney. The strategy will be backed up by £350,000 of support from the Scottish Government to help address some of the barriers which parents may face, and will target specific groups such as ethnic minority parents, parents of children with additional support needs, those with disabled children and those with learning disabilities. During a meeting with parents and pupils at Ibrox Primary School today in Glasgow, John Swinney said, "I'm pleased to launch this action plan today which builds on existing legislation to support and enhance the role of parents in their child's education. We want every parent and family to have the right support in place so that they can be involved in every stage of their child's learning and development. We know there's a strong link between parental engagement and academic achievement, and this plan will play a key role in helping to reduce the attainment gap. This action plan will help cement Scotland's place as a world leader in parental involvement and engagement, and I look forward to working with a wide range of partners to deliver this plan in the coming 3 years." Holyrood's Public Petitions Committee is calling on the Scottish Government to stop the use of mesh procedures in Scotland after considering evidence from the findings of an independent review set up to examine the controversial procedure. The issue was first highlighted by the Scottish Mesh Survivors Petition as part of their Hear Our Voice campaign in April 2014. The petition called for a range of steps to be taken, including the suspension of mesh procedures and improved recording and reporting mechanisms after women experienced debilitating and life-changing problems from the procedure, used to treat pelvic organ prolapse and stress urinary incontinence. The independent review into the use and safety of the procedures was then announced by the Scottish Government, when it also requested health boards to stop the procedure until the conclusion of the review. Now the committee has published a report criticising the continued use of the method regardless, as well as raising concerns about women not being believed when reporting their complications to medical staff. Johanne Lamont, MSP and convener of Public Petitions Committee, said, "I am grateful to the petitioners, Elaine Holmes and Olive McElroy, for bringing forward this petition, and I commend their courage and commitment in the face of their trauma. Seeing and hearing their experiences of the many women we have heard from during our consideration of this petition was incredibly emotional, with the physical and mental impact plain to see." One of the most important things to come out of this report was the extent to which women were not believed when they were highlighting their concerns, ultimately resulting in there being no record of their concerns. Now that we have published a report, we urge the Scottish Government to respond to our recommendations and the concerns of women. In response, the Scottish Government spokesman said, "The Scottish Government notes the publication of the Public Petition Committee's report and will give serious consideration to the findings. In response, the Chief Medical Officer will develop designated centres of expertise with health boards where there are very few women who have no other choice than to have procedures using mesh will be able to be treated. This will guarantee that all the work which has been put into place since the suspension in 2014 regarding consent and multidisciplinary team involvement occurs all over Scotland and prevents the harm which has occurred in the past. The Chief Medical Officer will also commission a prospective audit of all procedures done in Scotland going forward. This will ensure that the highest standards of fully informed consent and shared decision making, which she expects in light of the evidence brought forward by the Public Petitions Committee." The MHRA is the regulator of medical devices across the UK, and responsible for the agency is reserved to Westminster. The Scottish Government cannot therefore ban mesh. We have, however, repeatedly raised concerns about mesh with the MHRA when they have been brought to our attention, and were the agency to issue a medical device alert in relation to it, health boards would be fully expected to act on it. All boards are fully expected to implement the recommendations of the independent review. The Scottish Government's request that they suspend use of transvaginal mesh will remain in place until the Chief Medical Officer is satisfied that they have been implemented and all necessary safeguards are in place. The President of Catalonia, Quim Torra, has invited Nicola Sturgeon to Barcelona during a meeting with her in Edinburgh last month. Whilst the minutes of the meeting, which were released after a Freedom of Information request by the Herald and indicated that she would be delighted to do so, the Scottish Government said on Tuesday that no arrangements for a reciprocal meeting have been made at this time. In an official statement, they added, the First Minister had a productive meeting with President Torra, and we will look forward to working on opportunities in the future together. European Union leaders are likely to hold an emergency summit in November to consider any Brexit agreement, as an informal deadline in October may be missed, diplomats in Brussels have said. Negotiations on the divorce deal resume after a summer recess. However, expectations are fading that things will be wrapped up for a regular EU summit in October. The October 18 to 19 summit of all EU leaders has long been cast as the make or break moment for a Brexit deal, but continuous disagreements, mostly regarding avoiding border checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, have now cast that into doubt, and some diplomats estimate it may trail into December. Asked whether it was still the British government's aim to reach a deal in October, a spokesperson for May said, "This is certainly what we are working towards, yes." Britain can become a 21st century exporting superpower, Liam Fox has said, as he outlined plans to encourage greater exports from post-Brexit Britain. Fox said that there are currently 400,000 UK firms that could be exporting but aren't, and that the UK needs to do more to exploit the rise of the global middle class. The International Trade Secretary wants to increase exports as a proportion of GDP from 30% to 35%, by launching an online information hub where the department will post opportunities. However, the department has not yet set a timescale for reaching this goal. Jeremy Hunt has called for fresh EU sanctions against Russia in a move to stand shoulder to shoulder with the US against the aggressive behaviour of Moscow. The news comes as the US State Department prepares to impose sweeping sanctions against Vladimir Putin's administration, saying Russia had violated international law with a nerve agent attack on the streets of Britain. Hunt will also repeat an earlier statement saying that a no-deal Brexit represents one of the greatest threats to European unity, and suggests that a messy divorce would create tension between European allies, which could take a generation to heal. Further sanctions from the US are expected to take effect by tomorrow and will include restrictions on exports of sensitive technologies. If Moscow fails to respond to requests, it will not use chemical weapons within the next 90 days. Further, more draconian rules may have to be taken. The Russian embassy in the US denounced the move and rejected the accusation, calling it far-fetched. Meanwhile, Microsoft has said that it has thwarted Russian attempts to launch cyber attacks against US conservative groups. The software company said a Russian hacking group called Fancy Bear had tried to steal data from political think tanks, including International Republican Institute and the Hudson Institute, but they had been thwarted when its security staff had gained control of 6 domains mimicking their websites. Former Chief Inspector Sir Norman Bettison, who was accused of trying to blame Liverpool fans for the 1989 Hillsborough disaster, has had all charges against him dropped by the Crown Prosecution Service. The former South Yorkshire police officer, who was subsequently appointed Chief Constable of Merseyside and West Yorkshire Police Forces, was charged with 4 counts of misconduct for statements he made during his time in the role regarding the culpability of fans and his own role in the wake of the tragedy. Bettison has always denied any wrongdoing, and insufficient evidence from 2 witnesses and the death of a third meant there was no real prospect of securing a conviction, so the case was discontinued after a review of evidence and was confirmed at a hearing at Preston Crown Court. And Home Secretary Sajid Javid has apologised to 18 members of the UK's Windrush generation after a review of 11,800 cases identified that these 18 individuals were most likely to have suffered detriment because their right to be in the UK was not recognised, and that the Home Office was most likely to have acted wrongfully. Of the 18, the review found that 11 had left the UK, with some having been served immigration papers telling them they had no right to be in the country. The government will help these people return if they wish to, with one individual already being supported. They will also direct them to a compensation scheme which is currently being set up. The remaining 7 were detained but subsequently released without being removed. In addition to these 18 cases, officials have identified another 146 cases of people of Caribbean Commonwealth nationality born before 1973 who were detained or deported. A 45-year-old man has been arrested following a stabbing on a fishing port at a port in Caithness. Emergency crews were called out to a disturbance on board the Briska at Scrabster Harbour around midnight. The victim of the stabbing, also aged 45, suffered serious but non-threatening life injuries, the police have confirmed. He is currently receiving treatment at Wickes Caithness General Hospital. A tidal stream turbine off the coast of Orkney has produced more renewable energy in a year than Scotland's entire wave and tidal sector has ever before. The turbine is the most powerful of its kind in the world, and in the 12 months of continuous operation, the Scott Renewables SR2000 supplied the equivalent annual power demand of about 830 households. The European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney has tested 30 different devices since it was launched in 2003. Between them, they have generated 2.8 gigawatts per hour worth of electricity. However, the latest full-scale prototype has so far proved to be the most successful. 50 years ago today saw the Prague 50 years ago today, the Prague Spring was brought to a violent end when Warsaw Pax invaded Czechoslovakia. 108 civilians were killed and democratization was suppressed for 2 decades. The photo of the bare-chested man became a symbol of resistance. Occupation forces left the country on the 21st of July in 1991, and Czechoslovakia became the 2 European nations of the Czech Republic and Slovakia following the Velvet Revolution. And with many celebrating Eid today, Muslim worshippers from across the world are scaling Mount Arafat, the peak of the Hajj pilgrimage in the southeast of Mecca, in order to atone for their sins. Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and authorities say that nearly 2.4 million Muslims made the trip to Saudi Arabia for the annual pilgrimage. We'd like to wish an Eid Mubarak to all of our Muslim viewers who are watching. That's all we have for tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Good evening.